So Happen is a cohort that brings together education, health and research in line with the new curriculum proposals for health and wellbeing. People have heard me say this a lot. I've been calling it the new curriculum because it provides context for people not in education, but I know that people working in education will now know that this new curriculum is not the new curriculum and it's embedded practice. So if I say the new curriculum, I know that it's been around for a while. But basically, we're looking at bringing those things together to work better for schools in line with the curriculum for Wales, which now gives more autonomy over to schools to design their curriculum and to design elements of health and wellbeing within that. So the new curriculum, or the curriculum for Wales, has basically said that instead of working in siloed subjects where we would basically have, numeracy, literacy, history, all of those. I can't think of any more school subjects for some reason, they've all gone. But instead of working in siloed school subjects, what we now have is 6 areas of learning experience, and they help tie everything together. So we now have health and wellbeing as a core area of learning experience, and that kind of acts. When I went to a consultation meeting, they basically said the health and wellbeing will act like a golden thread that weaves everything together in terms of the curriculum. So that's where we saw as a gap. We saw so that Happen could come in and it could help kind of weave all of that together through health and wellbeing. So if we cast our mind back to like 2014, the reason that Happen exists is because we did initial consultations with school staff and head teachers, and they told us that there is an increasing need to meet literacy and numeracy targets, and that's the kind of core business of schools. But they feel overburdened with loads of other initiatives. So that could be initiatives, that improve physical activity, that help aim to improve teeth brushing, that improved mental health, everything and anything that you can think of. Head teachers were saying that they just felt overburdened. And at the time in 2014, the new curriculum was being discussed, it was going to start emerging, and there was a call for a better understanding of school needs, greater autonomy and involvement for schools, and advocating for a more collaborative approach to improving school health. So that's where we saw that gap. So bridging the gap between the research and school practice. So providing something that meant that we could understand the relationships between child health and wellbeing, education attainment, longer term health and employment outcomes, and also school practice. So instead of schools feeling overburdened with a lack of collaboration, we were going to advocate for more autonomy and involvement to promote health and wellbeing in schools. So we came up with the Happen model. So we've developed a general health and wellbeing survey for pupils in years 4, 5 and 6, and we have been piloting that work in year 3, and basically it's a general health and wellbeing survey that collects a range of typical health behaviours. So that could be physical activity, nutrition, sleep, wellbeing, safety, local area, basically anything that schools are concerned about in terms of typical health behaviours and our priorities. I'm going to talk a little bit in the next slide about how we identify those priorities, but essentially it's a typical range of health behaviours. So that survey is completed in school time. Schools can choose to do it when and how they would like to do it. And we've now created a system that basically means that you do not have to have researcher involvement. Schools can go away and do it, and they have the autonomy to do it. Then once schools have completed the survey, they'll let us know, and then we give a individual school report back. So it's school level average results compared to national averages, and this allows schools to identify and prioritise aspects within the school report. So for example, previously schools might have just said that everything was a challenge or something that they had to work on. Well, this school report provides a more targeted approach to that. So for example, you can identify where you might have lower rates of physical activity or lower rates of active travel. And we've had some phenomenal case studies, for example, from a primary school in Newport, where they've given this report over to pupil voice groups, and they've had pupils involved in trying to co-create change. And that I think the example was around, they had low active travel. So what they did was they brought cycling proficiency into school. They advocated for walking buses, and that was a change that they managed to create within the school. That school report is aligned with the new curriculum for Wales. So we've made sure that the kind of statements reflect the what matters statements, so schools can make links between the report and the curriculum. And then what we have as a result of that is a phenomenal cohort that then we are able to do research with. So currently over 650 schools have registered to take part in Happen, and over 35,000 pupils have taken part in Happen so far. That's based off data that we had last academic year, no, 2 academic years ago. We've just done a sale upload for last academic year, so that number's going to rise to over 40,000. And then we've got this year's data, so that number inside and outside of sale probably looks more around 45, edging on 50,000 pupils that have taken part in Happen so far. So it presents the opportunities for pupils to learn and make informed decisions about their health. Like I was saying, we have the Happen report. Some schools also opt for a Happen infographic. And then that gives autonomy over to teachers, PTA groups, pupil voice. So it allows schools to make individual changes to their health and wellbeing plans, and they can also evaluate practice and intervention as well. So some schools will opt to do it at the start of the year and then at the end of the year. Some schools will opt to do it in a 6 weeks block to try and see where they're at, where they've started and where they're at. Some schools will opt to do it every 2 years, every 3 years. We just put the autonomy all over to the school to be able to do this. And this then gives us a feedback loop. So we close the survey in the summer. Obviously, schools are away. They're not in school, so no one can take part in the survey anyway. But we close it and we look at doing a period of identifying research priorities. This research priority does kind of exist throughout the school year. So if we have stakeholders or if we have kind of cultural or societal things that arise, then we are able to add them into the survey. But it's looking at identifying priorities that will impact everyone. So for example, when we saw the implementation of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, we were able to ask questions in Happen around how do pupils feel about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit? Do they think it's a good idea? And we're able to put those priorities at the forefront of the survey, and then we're able to report that back to key stakeholders and also to schools too. So that helps us co-produce the survey. So that means that the survey is capturing everything that everyone wants that are involved in education and health. And it's not just us as researchers trying to guess what would be good information for everyone. Obviously, then we launched the survey in September. We're then able to feedback findings via the report to schools, but we're also able to build this phenomenal e-cohort that we now have of over 35,000 pupils in Sale. But outside of Sale, like I said, that number's grown to around 10 to 15,000 more. And that allows us to do larger scale research and evaluation as well. So we have this cohort, obviously it's in Sale, so we can do data linkage with that data set. I'm going to give some examples of what we've done previously in just a second. But it also enables us to do evaluation. So for example, in the past, we've done evaluations of things like the Daily Mile, outdoor learning, so that we're able to react to things that schools are doing or might be asked to do. This is what the current Happen cohort looks like. So like I said, in Sale, we have, just over 35,000. So the exact number is 37,902. We have 28,000 of those pupils with an ALF, so an anonymized linking field. If you're familiar with Sale, you know what that means. If you're not familiar with Sale, that basically means that they have an ALF, which means that we can link it to other administrative health data. You can see kind of a breakdown of what that looks like in terms of gender, ethnicity, deprivation and year group. But on the whole, we are quite representative of what the Welsh population looks like. So what have been our priorities so far? So the Happen cohort has been used to explore health and wellbeing of children during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we were able to link what we were collecting data on in the pandemic to test results in Sale. To look at what was the likelihood of you having an uptake of the vaccination and what was it like for you to have a positive COVID result. And basically what we found from that is that there were significant associations between parental health literacy and monitoring behaviours between positive test results. So obviously the more health literate you are, probably the more aware of COVID you were, the probably more likely that you were going to be for testing. What happened, the way that Happen works and what we were able to do during COVID is we were able to do a rapid response. So we were able to adapt the survey and add in questions. As I was talking earlier about that feedback loop around research priorities, we were able to really engage with stakeholders very, very early on and redesign the survey so it captured health behaviours at home. So we have this good cohort as well, where we have children self-reporting health and wellbeing during their time at home and during school closures. What we were also able to do from that data set is look at it from a pupil's perspective. We were able to link that data in Sale to free school meal status at the time as a proxy for deprivation, looking at the impact of school closures and health and wellbeing. And what we found in that is that children that were eligible for free school meals were experiencing adverse consequences in terms of physical physical health, reduced physical activity and suboptimal dietary choices as a result of school closures, was just highlighted how important the school setting is in protecting those health behaviours. What we did find on the flip side of that is that children that were not eligible for free school meal actually looked like they were having a great time at home, and they were thriving during those school closures. We saw some increases in things like physical activity, but on the whole, it was a widening health equality that we could see from using that data. It's also a platform for conducting school-based research. So as I said, natural experiments, evaluations of things like the Daily Mile and outdoor learning, and they provided an evidence base of interventions that can work or be adapted in schools, providing recommendations for future implementation and sustainability. So with outdoor learning and with the Daily Mile, we've produced recommendations of how best that they could be done and be used. It's really important to us that Happen represents the voices of young people in Wales. So a lot of what we do tries to embed as much as possible the young people's voices. It's the self-report survey, and we have open-ended questions in that as well. But we really, really want to put young people's voices at the front. So we've done research exploring the wants and needs of play. And we did that in the context of school closures and in the context of COVID. But what we found was across the board, those wants and needs have always remained the same, which means we have to do a lot more to try and improve those priorities. And what we found is that more time, space, permission and opportunities for a diverse range of activities is what young people are advocating for. And we've also been able to look at using Happen to represent teacher and head teachers' views as well. One of the most recent pieces of research that we've done is looking at changes in wellbeing over time, so from 2016 until 2022. What we found in that, you can have, I won't go through all of these findings. If you want to take a little read, I'm sure we can share the slides as well if you want them for future use. But what we found as kind of the headline news from this research piece is that health and wellbeing has been declining prior to the pandemic. So that's been a trend that we've observed. The pandemic has heightened that slightly, but we are seeing that downward trend in pretty much across the board in health and well-being, which highlights that the pandemic cannot be totally to blame for everything, and that we cannot presume that just because the pandemic is over, things will get better. We need to action and do a lot more in terms of improving opportunity. So things like physical health, children not being able to report that they can swim has decreased. Mental health issues like emotional behavioural difficulties have risen. Indicators of well-being like autonomy, so having a choice and believing that you are competent to do things, have also declined, which is concerning. We're currently doing a universal free school meal evaluation, and we're looking at using Happen then to look at health and well-being trends and how that links to having a free school meal and what the impact of free school meals is on general health and well-being. We've done some preliminary qualitative stuff with that, looking at asking pupils' opinions on free school meals and the free school meal rollout. There's issues around food quality, food choices and logistical challenges in some settings. But there has been some feedback that the free school meals might be enhancing social interactions, but that's currently underway. But we have done a global scoping review which says that children's health outcomes do improve with free school meals. So we're looking at trying to connect the dots between what is theoretically a very good provision and what practically we can do a little bit better. But we're also, one of the next stages within that evaluation is to look at doing linkage and SAIL to look at, are there any populations specifically that free school meals benefit? So for example, people with SEN status, for example. So that's Happen, very whistle stop, very overview. So as I was saying earlier, so growing up in Wales is now an umbrella term that we use for Happen and Born in Wales. So Happen has the Happen survey and this cohort, and then we have Born in Wales, which has kind of three arms to it. So it works from birth all the way up to 3 years. So we have an expectant parents, a parents and a dad's element of Born in Wales. And that also then builds this cohort of what it's like to be a child in Wales from the ages of 0 to 3. And then we've got this nurseries network, which is now met in the middle. We have a gap where we've got Happen, we've got Born in Wales, and there's something in between. So now we have the nursery network. And the nursery network is using the successful infrastructure that we have with Happen, and then it's looking at trying to do that in a nursery setting. So this is more parental views, but it's still doing the same thing where nurseries get a report back which can inform practice then, and it's still building that cohort. So in terms of Born in Wales, there's over 4,000 responses from expecting parents and parents that have been used for linkage. And then that's also then been able to be linked to routinely collected data. So things like the NCC HD in Sale. But if you want to know a little bit more about that, then Hope is your person in terms of Born in Wales. But it just goes to show the scope of data that we now have from birth all the way up to age 11, which spans across Born in Wales, the nursery network, and through Happen. So we can build this really great picture of what it's like to grow up in Wales. So just as an overview, so Born in Wales is the longitudinal birth cohort, and we can help understand how various factors impact child health, development and well-being from pregnancy through childhood. And then because of that nursery network, we can then also bridge that gap. And then we've got that data for Happen then as well. And it's the same methodology that Happen has, so recurring surveys and being able to link that to routinely collected data as well. So yes, that's it. That's a very quick tour of growing up in Wales. I don't know if we've got time for questions.
Thank you. I might ask everybody at the end, if that's okay, to ask questions, because actually I think, Sarah, your talk follows this really, really well. And so we're looking forward to hearing about measuring the environment in school. So thanks very much.
Fabulous. You're very welcome. Let me just share my screen. You're going to see yourselves for a little bit. Slideshow. Okay, can somebody tell me, can you see a full screen?
Yes.
Great. And
yes.
You can't see yourselves? Fabulous. Okay, great. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk about SAMmy, which is a schools air quality monitoring project. So it stands for Schools Air Quality Monitoring for Health and Education. And before I start, I just want to say that so I'm really delighted to be working with Michaela and Hope on a new project called CHILI, which stands for Child's Health Impacts Learning Environment. I'm not quite sure what it stands for, but it's being led by UCL. And we're basically going to try and link together the so child health data sets together with data sets around what's happening in the indoor environment in schools, through digital twins, through us doing actual schools monitoring of air quality, and linking that all with the kind of net zero agenda. So as schools move towards net zero, how are we actually trying to, how will the changes that they're going to need to make their buildings more airtight, for example, to help reduce the heating bills and also to help reduce carbon emissions? What might the knock-on effects be on thermal comfort and indoor air quality and things like that? So, so I'm really excited to be working with Michaela and the team on that project. And so that's kind of why I've been invited today to talk a bit about SAMmy, because SAMmy and Happen together are going to be kind of a really important part of this new project, CHILI. So we haven't actually within SAMmy linked to health data yet, but that's something we're going to be doing as we go forward. So I will talk to you about what we're doing on the project so far, and all questions are welcome. So I just wanted to say where I'm from at the moment. So I'm from the Stockholm Environment Institute at the University of York. So we're an international research organisation which is aiming to support decision making and induce change towards sustainable development right around the world. And we do that by providing knowledge that bridges that science, that policy and the practice in the fields of environment and development. And we've got 8 centres around the world. I'm our centre director at York. We've got about 55 staff here. But the reason we're called Stockholm is because that's where our head office is, but also the Stockholm Convention on Biodiversity on Sustainability was what really started us off over 35 years ago. So we have a citizen science group, which I'm a member of, and our group has been designing and running and evaluating and consulting on citizen science projects since 2008. And citizen science is really about involving members of the public in scientific research. And I should note here that we define citizen to mean like a citizen of science and citizen of the world. This is not anything related to your actual citizenship status. So we do work on a whole range of topics, and we also do kind of research around citizen science theory. And we're really trying to create broader social change through citizen science projects. And we very focus on doing inclusive research, ethical research that's sensitive to existing power dynamics, and equally centres both the kind of researchers wanting the outcomes, wanting to do the research, and the participants in them. So I'm going to talk about the SAMmy project, which is an example of a citizen science project. So SAMmy stands for Schools Air Quality Monitoring for Health and Education. Researchers, we love our acronyms, don't we, for projects. So we started in 2012, and it's a citizen science project working with UK schools to help improve their understanding of indoor air quality. So improve both schools' understanding of indoor air quality and researchers' understanding, the scientific community's understanding of indoor air quality. And it started as a collaboration between Imperial College in London, the University of Cambridge, they were jointly leading it, also the universities of Surrey, Leeds, the University of York, the UK Health Security Agency, and it was funded through EPSRC, and the Department for Education gave us some starter funding. And now we've branched onto different funding sources and other bits of work that we're doing, but I'll just focus on SAMmy. So we send SAMmy schools a monitor, and that monitor, it's a type of monitor called an air gradient sensor. It's an indoor air quality monitor, and it gathers data every minute of carbon dioxide, temperature, humidity, particulate matter, and total volatile organic compounds, which are the bits that you can smell. And we co-designed a web app so that schools can go in and see the data in real time from their air quality monitors. There's also, if you can see on this picture here, you can just about see this monitor. It's got a little screen on, so they can actually see the data on the monitor. There's also a little light range which tells them the CO2 levels in the room. But this web app, they can go and see all of their data historically and the current data. And then they can also do activities, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So the way that it works is the school's registered, they receive and then they set up their SAMmy monitor. If anyone wants to talk to me about trying to set up Internet of Things devices in schools right across the UK, it's a complete and utter nightmare. If any of you have tried to do that, I'm very happy to discuss on another call. Then they can explore their data on this web app that we co-designed with schools. There's some fun activities in there, 24 of them currently, which they can use to learn about air quality. So there's things like learning about what the different metrics mean. So what is carbon dioxide? Why is it important? What is particulate matter? Why is that important? But also things like creative activities like writing a letter to your MP or having a debate about clean air, for example. And then there's also activities which give us as researchers really important contextual data about where those monitors are placed. So what sort of classroom is it? Is it an art classroom? Because you would expect to have a very different indoor air pollution profile to perhaps a science classroom or a school hall or a classroom where you're not doing particularly high emitting activities. So they tell us things like what sort of classroom it is, how many pupils are usually in there, how many windows there are that can be opened, all really important contextual information for us. And then our researchers analyse that data and then report on air quality in classrooms and to people like the teaching unions, the Department for Education, people like that. And schools can also download their own data and play with it and do whatever they want. And that's really important because often schools struggle to teach real life data analysis using actually interesting data sets. And, you know, there's kind of big data sets that were collected a long time ago, which they're still using. But this is kind of data about their own classrooms. So they really value being able to have that data. So why are we taking a citizen science approach to this project? Well, it allows us to gather real world data from hundreds of classrooms. But what's so important is that by using this collaborative approach, the citizen science approach, not only are we as researchers getting insight into, you know, these classrooms that would be really hard for us to reach otherwise and very expensive for us to reach other ways, pupils and teachers gain that knowledge and understanding of air quality whilst they're collecting that data. So they also gain skills in things like interpreting graphs, analysing data, as I already mentioned, doing experiments, writing creatively, and really importantly, because people can see the data about their classrooms and we support them to know what action to take to improve it, you're giving pupils that sense of agency. So they maybe see some orange light, or when CO2 gets even higher. So CO2 is a measure, obviously, of how much air has been rebreathed. And so if you've got high CO2 levels, that's suggesting that you maybe need to take some action to open the windows and get some air in from the outside and get the stale air out. So, you know, by seeing the data, they can see, oh, okay, I've got some lights on my monitor that are telling me I need to open the window. Oh, look, I see the lights change to green. And they can see that in the web app as well. So that's really important. That pupil agency is very important to us. And then the fact that we co-designed this web app through a series of online co-design sessions means that it's meeting pupils' and teachers' needs, and that they are more likely to use it. So just some numbers about who's been involved. So we had about 123 schools who were involved in what we called our co-design phase of some stage. So that was testing things for us, giving us feedback, talking to us about logos, to helping us work out the design of things, telling us particular features they wanted, things like that. We've recruited over 1,300 schools across the UK, and that's giving us a data set of over 100,000 school data days per year, which we think is really impressive. And we are defining the citizen science that we're doing in SAMmy as a collaborative citizen science project. So this is a diagram which shows the different types of citizen science projects that you can have. So if you think about at the top, you've got the different stages of the scientific process. I'm just going to shut the window because I can hear a plane going over. Hang on. Hasn't made very much difference my end, but hopefully it's not too loud your end. So if you think about the research process as being starting right at the beginning, about thinking about what the topic is going to be, developing hypotheses and research questions, and projects that involve people community participants right at this stage of the scientific process, and then involve them all the way through, we call these co-created citizen science projects. So the next stage, if you think about developing a project, is developing your methods, so trialing methods, defining them, developing them, refining them, etc. And so projects that kind of involve people from this stage onwards, we call collaborative citizen science projects. The next stage of doing any research is obviously collecting your data. And projects that just involve people at this stage of the scientific process, we call contributory citizen science projects. So projects you might be aware of in this space would be, for example, the RSPB Big Garden Bird Watch, which happened at the end of January. So this is somewhere where researchers at the RSPB have said, we'd like you people to collect data on birds you see in your garden. Please go and collect this data. And so people are just effectively data gatherers. Then obviously the next stage is analysing data and disseminating data. And we feel that we're doing the kind of data analysis bit with participants because they can analyse that data. And we know that schools are going and doing their own experiments. So we had one school who decided that they wanted to see whether there was a relationship between how sleepy people felt in the classroom and carbon dioxide levels in the classroom, which is what we would expect to see. So some year 9 pupils went and did a survey in the school and found out that, yes, indeed, people were feeling more sleepy in the afternoons. And actually, that was when the CO2 levels had been building up throughout the day. And so they were finding it harder to concentrate. And then disseminating the findings. So we make sure that we share our results via social media. We get schools involved in meetings where they can hear about the findings. But there's also these creative activities in the web app which support the schools to go and talk about their findings to other people. So some of the outputs that we've got from SAMmy so far. So we've got the 6 peer-reviewed articles published. You can read the details here, and I've got a link at the end which will take you to summaries of all of this stuff. So we've done some work on the kind of methods that we've used, and then some more on the kind of findings. And there's other papers in the pipeline. And then we're also contributing to policy processes. So things like talking to all-party parliamentary groups, the Wales Cross-Party Working Group, Common Select Committee, Department for Education, things like that. And then I'm just going to talk you through some of the findings from the project so far. And the data is from my colleagues at Imperial College, as you can see. So what we found is that most schools adhere to what we call BB 101. So this is a Department for Education guidance, which is that the CO2 levels averaged over the school day should be below 1,500 parts per million within naturally ventilated classrooms. Now, I should say that research shows that over 1,000 parts per million of CO2 levels, you do start to see cognitive effects. So things like people feeling, you can feel it's a bit stuffy. I've got a monitor, I think I've got a monitor in here, and I can see that, you know, now I've closed the window, the CO2 levels are going up a little bit. So over about 1,000 parts per million, we know that there are cognitive effects. So we don't, I should say that we don't think that BB 101 is a very sensible guideline. But anyway, that's what we're working with. So what we found is that most schools in warm weather, so in the summer term, spring and summer terms, we find that they can meet this this guideline, but the classrooms are not very well ventilated. So ventilation rates, when it's warm outside and when the classrooms do have their windows open, they're about 6 litres per second per person. That's the ventilation rate. When it's cold outside, our data is showing that ventilation rates are around 4 litres per second per person of air flow. The government regulations for offices state a minimum of 10 litres per second per person. So you can see from these numbers that even when it's warm, classrooms are not adequately ventilated if we were to take those government guidelines. And it's important also to note that, you know, pupils have, you know, younger pupils in particular, smaller lungs, and actually perhaps we need even better regulations around the air that they're breathing. The other thing that we found from our data is that the particulate matter from outside is very much coming into classrooms. So what we've found, we looked at the data set and saw what was coming in related to those outdoor weather stations. And what you can see here is that you've got the outdoor averages in the blue line. So for those of you who can't see colours, this is the top line here, the wiggly top line, and then the line underneath, that's the red line, and it shows that they track very closely. So where we have peaks, and this huge peak in September that you can see, this is a Sahara dust event that happened. This was September 23. We saw this event. So Sahara dust got blown over from the Sahara, and we could see it on cars and things like that right across the UK. And we saw a real spike in the particulate matter coming into schools around about that time as well. And we can also detect spikes, not quite so clearly in this graph, but we can detect spikes in the data around events like Diwali and fireworks night as well. So we know that a lot of the particulate matter is actually coming in from outside, which means we really need to think about not just controlling sources inside the schools for air quality, but also outside. So I've lost all your faces, but I'm hoping that someone will shout if you need to. So I just want to talk you through kind of what SAMmy offers for schools. So this is a screen grab of one of the graphs that you could see in the web app. So this is a graph of particulate matter, and what you can see here is that we had this kind of spike in particulate matter at around 2 o'clock on this date. I think this is actually data from my house rather than being from a school, because it's I've got a monitor in my kitchen, and I suspect that somebody was cooking something over the Christmas holidays at this point in time. But what this allows you to do is it allows pupils and teachers to look at an event that's interesting to them, and this is an activity we call data detectives. And so what this does is it allows them to see, oh, there's a bit of a spike in my data there, and oh look, it also happens at 8 o'clock every day. What's happening at 8 o'clock every day? That's the same day, that's the time that our cleaner comes in and he's hoovering around, and that is resuspending the dust. So we work through with pupils in this activity to help them understand what might be causing any patterns in their data. And this just shows you another example of some of the visualizations within the web app. These help pupils to see what patterns there are in their data in different formats designed for different ages. So this one in the middle with all these dots, this is a single axis scatter plot, and we've had feedback from primary schools that they particularly like this kind of visualization. Older pupils like the bar charts, and then we've also kind of got these pie charts as well. And within each of these visualizations, we've got a little bit of text which explains the average for schools so that they can put their results in the context of other schools, and helps reduce any kind of concerns they might have that they're in any way abnormal, or highlight where there is a big discrepancy. So there's also on the outputs page, and I'll put the link into the chat screen later, but on our outputs page we make sure that we've got lay summaries of all of the outputs that we create, so all of the papers, but we also do these kind of technical reports as well, which are designed to be read by school teachers or estates managers, others like that who might be interested in the data. And that's really important to us because, you know, we're collecting, people are giving us their precious time to participate in our project, and it's so important to us ethically that we give something back and we make sure that they understand what their data are being used for, and can understand that in a kind of easy to understand way. We also have within the web app some kind of pupil-friendly videos explaining key findings, and then quizzes about them to help embed the learning about air quality. We've got a resources hub as well, so they can learn about air pollution more widely, understand their monitored readings, and really importantly get that practical guidance. So, you know, if you are seeing high levels of carbon dioxide, for example, in your classroom, what are the actions that you can take about it? How will ventilation improve your air quality, but what are the trade-offs in relation to heat escaping? So recommendations about how often you might want to open the windows to make sure that you're not too much heat is not escaping, but you are still ventilating your space. The other ways that the other interactions that we have with schools is through our newsletter. So you can see an example of this on the screen here. And this is important because it communicates findings, but it also gives schools key actions that they can take to improve air quality. So we've got a top tip here, for example, about opening windows between classrooms, which is useful. So I mentioned already that we've recruited 1,321 schools. I also hinted that we have struggled with connecting monitors in schools. So we've had 885 monitors connected. So that means, disappointingly, we've got about 450 monitors that are just sat in a cupboard somewhere, probably. So we've got monitors going to these schools, and quite a high percentage of those monitors are still connected, which I think is really positive because, you know, teachers do move on, interests do change, etc. And the reason we've got a difference between the numbers of monitors and the numbers of schools is that we've got some schools in Hertfordshire where we've got one monitor per classroom, alongside a HEPA filter, which is helping filter the air, and we're looking to see whether those schools, whether the HEPA filter intervention does actually improve air quality in those classrooms. I just wanted to show you a quote from one of the teachers who've been involved with us right from the beginning. So they say, the monitor and web app have provided our year 4 and 5 science group with a wealth of data to interrogate and analyse. The children's enthusiasm has been infectious, and there's tangible excitement of being able to access the data in real time. We're now determined to continue working towards achieving all the achievement badges. So we've got this kind of virtual badge system, and it shows pupils what they need to do to get up to the next level, as a way of incentivising them, because apparently everybody loves badges and stickers, whatever age they are. So thank you for listening. You can see lots more information on sammy.org.uk, and you can find us on LinkedIn or drop me an email. So I will stop sharing and we can take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I have a few questions to start with. Is there evidence sort of that SAMmy schools, over the time you've been doing it, that air quality improves in the classroom? So
That is such a great question, and we actually have a bid in at the moment, which I'm hoping to hear about in the next couple of weeks, which will allow us to explore that, because we haven't looked at that longitudinally. So we know anecdotally from what teachers have told us that they are taking actions that we would expect to be improving their air quality, but we haven't actually looked at that data yet, but hoping to do that soon with this grant. And if they don't fund us, we're going to look for money to do it elsewhere, because it's such an important piece of work that needs to be done.
And also, I wasn't clear whether opening windows or not opening windows was the better thing, because if you open them, you're letting in the pollution from outside, but if you don't open them, you're keeping everybody in self-circulating air, sort of. So what's the advice?
So the advice is, unless you are on a very busy road, the advice is that you should be opening your windows to keep your carbon dioxide levels lower, which means that pupils and teachers can concentrate better. If you're on a busy road, then what you need to be doing is opening windows that are on the opposite side of the building wherever possible. And so what you can ideally do is try and have windows that are open. If you're in a 2-story school, have windows that are open on the ground floor and windows that are open on a higher floor, and that will get that cross flow of air that you need. But it is very school specific, and so what we would want pupils to do and teachers to do is to look and see, well, actually, if I do open my window during the rush hour, what does that do to our particulate matter levels, and are they going up above this kind of like recommended World Health Organization line? And if they are, let's not open our windows during those 2 hours, and instead we'll open them in the middle of the day when the traffic is calmer. So it's kind of very bespoke.
I'm aware during COVID with my own kids that they opened the windows and only the teacher could wear their coat, and everybody was really, really upset about that they were all freezing. And the teacher was sitting in a couple of coats, really, and was all right.
And I think that's something that we're going to be exploring in Chile, isn't it, Michaela? Because what kind of they're interested in is, you know, as these buildings become more airtight, because that is the way that they're going to have to go to meet the net zero targets, and as buildings get retrofitted to improve that energy efficiency, you are going to have this trade-off where you're like, well, actually, that's potentially trapping pollutants in, and certainly raising the CO2 levels in. And so therefore you've got these high amounts of rebreathed air, and therefore lots of people breathing each other's germs in, as well as having a harder to concentrate environment, potentially making things hotter as well as the climate warms. And so it's kind of looking at, well, what adjustments could potentially be made? Are there adjustments around coat wearing in schools? Can we relax uniform regulations so that actually if you're hot you can wear like a vest top rather than, you know, your blazer? So I think that is the kind of the things that we're going to be exploring with pupils within Chile, which we're excited about.
Yeah. Have anybody else got questions or any thoughts on this approach? Rachel, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to check, is the amount of pupils in the classroom, is that kind of taken into account for some schools that have like a larger amount of pupils?
Yeah, so we ask pupils and teachers to fill in this, like, where is about your classroom. So when they connect their monitor, they're asked which monitor is your classroom in, and they're asked to tell us how many pupils are in that room. Great. But actually we can infer occupancy rates from the data. So we can infer basically from the CO2 data and how that changes over the course of the day, and what it goes back to overnight. We can actually infer how many pupils are in the classroom.
Great, yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Is this secondary schools mainly, so the children are changing classrooms, but not like primary school where they're all in the same room nearly all day?
Both.
Right.
So obviously it does depend, it does vary quite a lot for some of those schools and how it's changing. But I think my colleagues at Imperial who are analysing the data are kind of like, we've got such a large data set now that actually it's kind of, it's sort of noise that they can work. Yeah, I don't understand it, but they can work it out from that.
So go ahead, your question. So you got your hand up, you would go ahead.
Yeah, thank you both. That's brilliant. As Michaela knows, I spent 35 years as a secondary teacher mainly, but then head teacher and in a 3 to 19 school and a 3 an 11 to 19 school. So I recognise what you're saying, especially comment about children not being allowed to wear coats. I'm sorry for the profession. An observation and a question. The observation is, as you've both implied, it's very empowering giving agencies to children. So I really encourage the flow through to the age of 19 and youngsters being captured into the career, health, etc. And I think maybe going from badges to something more linked to specific local universities, maybe, I would really encourage. And the question is, have you got any indications of what happens as the makeup of the children changes, going from one academic year to another, as teachers change, as head teachers change? Do behaviours have an impact? Do activities have an impact?
Shall I start, Michaela?
Yeah, you start. You might end up saying exactly what I mean. So yeah, you go first.
Why don't you start then?
I was just going to say, we see it really obviously in terms of engagement with Happen. So you will often see it where schools we've never engaged with before will all of a sudden want to engage with us and will want to really meaningfully engage. And I think that that's a statement of like senior leadership, basically. If you have someone that's really enthusiastic about health and well-being, more often than not, they want to engage and they want to go above and beyond. So we can see it with patterns with like Happen school engagement, whether they want that extra support in terms of the infographic, whether they're more willing to feed back, the kind of case studies that we see back, and whether they fill in so we send out a survey as well at the end to kind of capture what teachers thought of it. And the more engaged schools will fill all of that in. That doesn't have any correlation in terms of the location of them or anything like that. It just seems to be the key thing is having buy-in from senior leadership and having someone that's passionate and enthusiastic about health and well-being. The pioneer schools for the curriculum, I say, are more engaged because they've had a lot longer to know what has been coming and how to set themselves up. But I guess the really simple answer to that question is, I think it's quite obvious and Happen. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think I would say exactly the same, is that kind of the enthusiasm of the individual teachers is really key. I think it's quite hard for us to tell how schools are actually using Sammy at this point in time. So again, this grant I'm really hoping that we hear positively on within the next couple of weeks, we'll explore a little bit more about kind of dive a bit more into our engagement data anyway, and see like how are specific types of pupils using it, and does engaging more with the web app, for example, lead to them making greater improvements in their air quality? Like, what are the kind of behaviours that they're doing on the back of that? But I think, I think it's with doing the disadvantage with setting up a citizen science project in this way, which is kind of large scale right across the UK, is that there's this trade-off between got lots of numbers of people doing stuff, but actually I don't really know what they're actually doing in the actual schools. And that's kind of slightly what we're struggling with at the moment. And that's why I'm really excited about the Chili project, which we're collaborating with Michaela and Hope on, because actually we are going to be able to go into schools and see how are they actually using this, and then how does that change for different age groups. And at the moment we've designed it so that we've just deliberately not said these are primary activities, these are secondary activities, because we know that in some schools, you know, you've got very varying abilities, and we don't want people to feel, you know, that, oh, I can't access those ones because my pupils aren't quite intellectually there or whatever. So we deliberately haven't designed it in that way. So it's designed to be flexible, but I do think that could be a bit off-putting for some schools. So we're going to do a bit of work looking at that as well. The other thing I just wanted to come back to on your comment about, you know, going beyond badges, and I really recognise the importance of that. So one of the things we've been doing is we've developed a kind of an activity within the web app, which is about careers of SAMmy research, SAMmy staff. So we've got the team's really diverse. It's like project managers, researchers, communication specialists, software developers, researchers of all different disciplines. And so we've got profiles of everybody, and that's really nice because they can go in and read those. And then there's a little like video quiz where they can go in and helps embed their learning. The other thing is we've done given ideas for extended project qualifications as well. So actually how those kind of higher end pupils can actually think about ideas that they can use the data with. So but it's really hard because they're so busy, and we know people are using the web app, but they're not telling us how they're using it or how their pupils are getting on unless we hear about it like happen chance.
Linking when you're going to be linking to, and I don't know if this will happen whether you're bringing SAMmy in to happen, but linking to how well they do in maths and how well they do the kids now. I think even if you don't find it improves air quality, it might really improve attainment in maths and enjoyment in the sort of sciences. So Michaela, you had your hand up there. I think Michaela's frozen.
She's either frozen or she's just stopped moving very much.
I think
Thinking
Michaela's
very
frozen.
hard.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts at all? Yeah, I think Michaela's coming back in a sec. One question I had is, what were the issues? You send the monitor out and then maybe you never hear from them again. Yeah. Is that the issues?
Yeah, so what happened was we had this highly successful Department for Education mail out where they said, this is a project we're supporting, everybody, you should sign up and get a SAMmy monitor. And we saw this huge spike when that mail out went of people signing up and registering, and they have to fill in their registration form, and it gives them information about kind of what they'll need to provide in terms of like Wi-Fi connectivity, plug sockets, things like that. So they all enthusiastically went and signed up for it. And we found that quite a lot of those schools at that point were the ones who never actually got themselves connected. So Lucy Way, my colleague here at SEI, and I were running kind of drop-in sessions for people to come and talk to us about like what they were struggling with. We'd have like a get started with your monitor guidance sessions, and we'd say people would come on the call occasionally and they'd be like, oh, so we'd say, well, what are you struggling with? And they would say, well, I've got my monitor and it's literally still there in its box, and they haven't struggled. They just literally have not had the time to get it out. And, you'll know as being a teacher, like, there's just so many demands on people's time. And this is a thing that is just another thing that somebody maybe once signed up enthusiastically for it, thinking that would be a good idea. And we do link to the curriculum. So, and it's, there's very much about pupil agency, which is, lots of the governments are really pushing at the minute, but it's just another thing on their plate. So there was that. I'd say teacher time has been a really big barrier, but the other really big barrier has been like just technologically trying to get people to connect these devices to their school Wi-Fi systems. And many schools have no problems at all, but depending on your internet service provider or your particular local council and their levels of lockdownness, their whitelisting policies, all of those kind of things, just means that some things just didn't happen. Oh yeah.
Michaela, you had your hand up before. I don't know.
Yeah, I did have my hand up, but then Sarah just said everything that I was going to say anyway, in terms of like being flexible, like relating it to the community and things like that, and being able to like have very real links to the people that are within the data, using the data, so you can have that really good relationship. But like Sarah was saying, I think the difficulty of working Pan Wales is that you do lose the ability to be able to do that deeper working. But we had a great meeting yesterday with a team in in an area in Swansea that want to kind of look at doing it as a cluster and looking at how the school can be like a community hub within that cluster. So it'll be really exciting to do some work around that and produce some case studies about, you know, how that can be done. But like Sarah was saying, it's really hard when you get loads and loads of data, because that's phenomenal, but you kind of do lose a little bit of the human aspect of it sometimes.
Is there any other thoughts or questions just before? No. No, so thanks very much, both of you. So I very much enjoyed that. I'm very interested in the chili and what happens next, and I very much hope you get your grant for us to see the impact really of what different Sammy makes to kids and to schools. So thanks a lot. I think next month, Alicia, that's the trials unit, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 speakers from our trials unit on Thursday, April the 3rd, same time.
Yeah, so talking about linking trials and routine data and sort of capacity development in people with both skills. So learning, yeah, so thanks a lot. Yeah, please do come back and talk about chili in very soon, hopefully. Thanks a lot, and see you next
Thank
time.
you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.